I think we can all agree that James Cameron is one of the most successful directors of all time, at least in terms of box office returns. If we look back at his career, the guy basically never missed. And I believe that one of the reasons for his success is his ability of centering his stories around relationships. Like, no matter how grandiose his stories can look on the surface, sinking ships, wars between aliens and humans or machines and humans, at the center of most of those stories, there's something as human, as universal as relationships. Now, having a romantic subplot is nothing particularly original. Pretty much every science fiction or action movie has a romantic subplot. But in most cases, the subplot is exactly that, a subplot. It's a dead weight that the story needs to carry along. Cameron uses his romantic subplots in a completely different way. If you think about movies like Titanic or Avatar, or in this case Terminator, the romantic subplot is an integral part of the main character journey. And this completely changes the dynamic of the story and, in my opinion, widens the appeal of the story. In the case of the Terminator, this simple trick takes what it should have been just a simple B-movie with a very, narrow audience and make it into something way bigger with a much larger appeal. To understand what Cameron is doing in the Terminator, we can start by thinking about one of the most classic story structures, which is that of the knight fighting with the dragon to save the princess. That story is simply a fight between the knight and the dragon, and the princess is nothing more than the goal. She's completely deprived of agency. What about centering the story around the princess? What about making this her story? So she's the one saving herself from the dragon. That could be an interesting way of innovating the structure. But then, what is there left to do for the knight? Well, she's still a princess at the beginning of the story, so she's gonna need somebody to help her become a warrior so she can defeat the dragon. So the knight could be the mentor, which is a great role and a role that matches very well with a love affair. It could be the lover and the mentor. And I can also start imagining a story structure, because she's gonna begin this story as a princess, so she's gonna need protection, which is he's gonna provide. Then he's gonna become the mentor, he's gonna teach her how to become a warrior. He's gonna disappear, as mentors always do, and then she's gonna actually get into the third act and defeat the dragon by herself. So I'm gonna have a love story, and I'm gonna have a character journey. Pack inside still an action. There's gonna be still a huge fight between the dragon, the knight, and the princess. But at this point, that fight is not gonna be the focal point of my story. The focal point is gonna be the relationship between the knight and the princess. And the dragon is gonna be this force pushing them together. So the core of my story is gonna be a love story. That is not going to feel like a love story, because the knight is gonna have other roles, other functions in the context of my story. Now, the success of a love story is predicated on the obstacles between the lovers. Because when you think about it, a love story should last 5 seconds, right? Jake and Anne fell in love and they got married, and end of the story. You need something to keep them apart. In the case of Terminator, what is keeping them apart is the fact that they belong to different universes. That is going to be the dramatic distance that she's going to have to cover in order to succeed. Now, don't get hooked up on definitions. Dramatic distance is just a term that I like to use because I think it expresses very well the concept, which is the idea of the distance between the main character and their goal. So you can say, oh, this is Frodo, this little hobbit, which is not particularly wise or strong, and this is Sauron, the evil lord. My story is going to be how Frodo defeated Sauron. It's a gigantic distance, and the audience is going to go like, oh, okay, this is going to be interesting to see how this small guy is going to defeat that guy. In the case of the Terminator, we understand that the dramatic distance is not so much the distance between her and the Terminator. It's the distance between her and Kyle Reese. He is a soldier who grew up in a post-apocalyptic world hunted by killer machines, and she's a waitress. She's a completely normal character. She's an average girl living her life. But she has to accept the idea that now she has entered a completely new world, because if she doesn't, she's gonna die.
Come with me if you want to live.
All of this come to fruition in what is the real core, the heart of the movie, which is the scene after Kyle Reese saves her from the Terminator. And they are in the car, they are escaping from the police and from the Terminator, so there's a lot of tension, and she doesn't know what's going on.
This isn't true. How could that man just get up after you did
He's not a man. Machine.
This is the scene in every other science fiction movie that you would do everything you can to cut. Because this is going to be a gigantic amount of exposition in which Kyle Reese has to explain to her what the hell is going on. But this story structure makes it so that this is anything but exposition. This is a crucial part, because this is the moment in which we have a plastic representation of the distance between these two characters.
600 series had rubber skin. We spotted them easy. But these are new. They look human. Sweat, bad breath, everything.
Which is, first of all, what Kyle Reese is telling her. This crazy story about the machines are attacking us, and you are the mother of the savior of humanity, this and that, which is insanity. But it's also the way he's saying this, which is a very matter-of-fact way of saying things without really paying attention to her emotional reaction to this. Because that tells us of the world he's coming from. For him, this is just his reality. He doesn't have any emotional intelligence, so to speak. He doesn't empathize with her, just like giving her the fact because they need to keep going. He's a soldier. But she's a waitress. And she's like, what? Like, she can't conceptualize this. And the moment he finished, telling her all the facts, she's like, oh, sure. And she tries to jump off the car. Understandably so. We understand why he's talking that way. We understand why she's reacting that way. And we understand that this needs to change. He needs to find a way to convince her, or she's done. She's going to be killed by the Terminator. So the question is not so much, is she going to survive? The question is like, how is she going to cover the distance from her to what he's saying? Which is an inherently more interesting question, because it's a more humane question. Is how these two characters are going to cover this gigantic distance separating them, which expresses itself on multiple dimensions, because it's philosophical in a way, it is cultural, it is emotional. It's a great starting point for a love story. She tried to escape, he pulled her back, the Terminator arrives and push them together because that is his function. So the chasing, and then they crash, and they get arrested. I mean, Kyle Reese got arrested, and she finds herself with the police, who gives her a perfectly rational explanation for all these things that she has seen.
Sarah, this is what they call body armor.
What the cops are doing, they are pulling her back to our world. The problem is that we, the audience, we know that she cannot stay there. And so now we are tense because we're thinking something is going to happen to pull her back to the world to which she actually belongs. And so we have this gigantic action scene, which is incredibly violent and incredibly satisfying for an action aficionado, which actually exhausts every doubt Sarah can have. When Reese saves her at the end of the sequence, she's now fully convinced that no, the guy didn't just have a vest, he wasn't just on drugs, the guy is really a machine. And this Kyle Reese, is the only one who can actually save me and protect me. So now her journey of transformation can really begin, and he passed through the two of them making love, which is a symbolic thing, of course, which symbolizes the fact that she's embracing this new reality by embracing him. She's covering that distance by embracing him. The Terminator, even if it doesn't feel like, it takes place basically during the course of one night. And Sarah goes from being a waitress at the beginning of the movie, at the end of the movie squashing the Terminator in the press. And I never heard anybody questioning that journey, which is a gigantic journey. And the reason why nobody ever questioned Sarah's journey is because Cameron understands that the distance between her and Reese is the capital he has to work with. He doesn't try to hide it, he doesn't try to minimize it. It's just he wants us to perceive it in full, and then he wants to cover it on screen, because that's the core of the movie. That's what the movie is about. And he does this so well that when Sarah falls in love with Kyle and they make love, we are with them. It's like, yeah, this makes perfect sense in the context of that story. It would not make sense if we would have the time to stop and think about what she's been through and everything. But in the flow of the story, that moment is perfect. So they make love. She finally becomes what she was supposed to become from the beginning of the movie. She becomes a warrior. He dies, because that's what mentors are supposed to do at one point. So she has to go through the final confrontation with the Terminator alone, and she kills the Terminator, and the movie ends. Now, as I said before, this very simple idea of, instead of having a romantic subplot, let's make that subplot an integral part of the main character journey. So let's center the movie about a character that needs to transform themselves. Like Rose in Titanic, like Jack, I think it's called, in Avatar, or like Sarah Connor in The Terminator. So it's going to be their story as they transform into something else, something that the story needs. And the tool for transforming them is going to be the love story. The genius of this is that Cameron used so few elements, and create stories that are very contained and simple, apparently, but at the same time feels epic. Or if you want to reverse the way we look at this, he takes grandiose, epic stories and he reduced them to something which is incredibly manageable and very human and universal. Cameron has a very clear idea about how to engage the largest audience possible and how to give his stories and what he really wants to talk about. Like, I want to make a movie about the Titanic because I got a hard on just thinking about it. I want to make a movie about killing machines. I want to make a movie about an alien planet. But how can I afford to make these incredibly expensive movies? Well, I need to talk to a lot of people. So I'm going to twist the shape of the story just a tiny bit. I'm going to change it, refocus it, and then I can actually afford to do what I really want to do and to talk about what I really want to talk about, because now I have a larger appeal. It's an incredibly clever move. And I think this is one of the reasons James Cameron is James Cameron.